I want to talk about what's known as the yugas. And this is a extremely interesting subject, and there's actually a book called, guess what? The Yugas. And it's written by two friends of mine, published by Ananda, and it's very well worth reading if what I tell you you're interested in. The Yugas are simply ages, the ages of the planet, okay? And so I want to talk a little bit about planetary evolution. And what I was starting to say is in the course of these many years of teaching, sharing these teachings, I don't feel like I teach you anything, but if I say it clearly enough, you might recognize it. That's basically how it works. If it's something you almost know and someone articulates it to you, then you get it. If you don't almost know it, you'll forget it. It'll just come and it'll be interesting for that long. The Gita talks about that. First, when people start telling you these teachings, first you're not in the room at all when anybody does. Then you're in the room, but as soon as they start talking, you fall asleep. So you take it, but you don't notice. Then you get to the point where you hear it, but you don't remember it. This is over many lifetimes. And then gradually, as Swami puts it, you have the karma to attract and hold these principles. And it's like two different verbs there. First you attract it, and then you hold it. So in any case, so in the years that I've spent sharing these teachings, there's a few things that I have noticed, I've come to believe, are extremely important for comprehending what the spiritual path is and for understanding how to live it and how to relate to this world. Because none of us, obviously in this room, and very, very few of us in this yuga, in this particular age of the planet, have the karma, because it's not what's happening now, to be able to find the path and just go off to the cave. When I came to this path, not before I met Kriyananda, when I was 19 and I was studying Vedanta through the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna and his disciple Vivekananda, I became completely convinced. I became convinced in about a minute because it was what I had been waiting for, and because of past lives as a yogi, I just recognized it. I knew this was it. But I couldn't figure out, I was living in San Francisco, I was working as a legal secretary. I had dropped out of college. I was basically just drifting. And I became utterly convinced of the truth that self-realization was the goal, that the spiritual path was the purpose. But my life was exactly the same. I would get up in the morning, I would go to work, to a job that I couldn't have cared less about. I got I got fired from this job that was kind of a nice job because it was the very beginning of technology. I was working for a legal firm, and they had some kind of a machine that allowed them to print out legal documents. They didn't have to be something or another. And so I would just sit in the room with this machine, and I could read and do anything I wanted until somebody needed me. I read the entire Valmiki Ramayana during the course of that job. I read it on the Geary Express bus going down Geary Avenue in San Francisco. And, I was reading like this, and Sita had been abducted by Rama, and Rama didn't know where she was. And all the people on the bus are just going to work. And I'm sitting there thinking, but Sita has been abducted by Rama. I was so lost in the book, I didn't know how they could continue their lives. We didn't know where Sita was. Would he find her? So I read the whole Ramayana, and then I got fired from the job. I thought they were going to give me a raise, but they fired me instead. And the personnel director was a very fine woman, and she didn't actually say these words, but she fired me because I didn't give a damn, basically. And to my mind, it was like, you would think I would care about this job, But that was where I was, because I cared about something that I didn't know how to access. And I remember I had this apartment in San Francisco, and it was in the back of the building, and there was a window, and it looked out on, a tiny little bit of green. In the city, you don't have much. I remember standing at that window, thinking about having a nervous breakdown. I could just have a psychotic break from reality, because the pressure was so strong on me between what I wanted to be and what I was, like that. And then this is past life memory, I'm sure. Oh, if I have a breakdown, then it'll just cause a lot of commotion, and the medical people come in, and they'll put me in an ambulance, and they'll take me to the hospital, and then I'll be in the hospital for a long time, and they'll give me treatment, and they'll give me drugs, and I'll be there for 3 or 4 months, and then I'll come out, and I'll be standing here looking out the window. And I thought, that's a waste of time. That's a waste of money and energy. Has to be another answer. So I decided to just go to work again. Into that walked Swami Kriyananda, who exemplified in his person all that I was trying to do. But what I was saying earlier was, in an attempt to figure out what to do, I went to the metaphysical bookstore. I started reading about the saints. I read about the Indian saints, the India saints, the Tibetan saints, the Christian missionaries, the Protestant missionaries, the Catholic nuns, like this. Being Jewish, I really didn't have access to a lot of these. Being a coward, I certainly didn't have access to Tibet or India. I couldn't imagine going into a cave. I just didn't know. I was going to have to live, quote, an ordinary life. But somehow I was going to have to make it match my ideals. I'm sure a lot of you in this room can capture what I'm saying. And then I met Swami Kriyananda, who actually was doing it all. He was totally dedicated. He was an American, which was nice because he spoke unaccented English, and he had he had a life experience that had some resemblance to mine, just growing up in the West, although he actually was raised in Europe, but it was at least the West. And he had a retreat, he had a community, I had all of those things, and I just, boom, that was it for me. I never looked back after that. But the point that I'm saying is, still, even though I have lived in ashram all of my life and have never had another job I didn't care about, 10 years later, when I was running our publishing company in our community, a job at which I was extremely incompetent. So my phrase is actually, I was running our publishing company into the ground until Swami had the sense to shift, change a few jobs around. And I realized that it's nice if your employees give a damn about your company. I actually wrote the personnel director a letter, thanked her for firing me, which I didn't understand at the time. It's just the way we grow, and I felt gratitude was appropriate. But in any case, we all have to live in this world, and wowie zowie, it's quite a planet right now, isn't it? Yeah, especially for people of high ideals. And we're here, we're this bubble of reality, and I know people keep coming in here, and I understand why. And do not underestimate the service that is being done here just by repeating those Sanskrit chants. Because as I was saying, I think last night, this is really a war between shadow and light. And that's the level on which it's really happening. Okay, so back to the yugas for a moment. So I've learned that a few things, if you understand them, you can comprehend this world much better. One is the yugas. What is going on the planet? That's what the yugas is about. The second is karma. What is going on with me? And that karma, it necessarily brings you to reincarnation, because without more than one lifetime, karma just doesn't make the least bit of sense. And then the chakra system, because the chakras, the phrase that we came up with the other day, the chakras are the storage bin for your karma. That's where your karma is kept and is constantly being emptied out into your life. So when you get these four things together, your capacity to relate is much better. So let's start with the yugas. Because we're either at the end of the world or we're at the beginning of a new age, and we can kind of toss it either way. End of the planet, dawn of a new age. Yogananda, Paramhansa Yogananda, spoke, and his guru Sri Yukteswar, that we are at the beginning of an upward moving cycle. But we are in the tumultuous middle of that transition. And there are four yugas, and the traditional Indian system, and I have to apologize because I do not know what Sivananda taught in this, but I know that many great masters hold to the Indian system, which says that the dark age of Kali Yuga is going to go on for tens of thousands of years more. Sri Yukteswar said he corrected that. So this is how the picture goes. And I can go into it in much more detail, but I don't have time, so I'll just give you the basics. The yugas, the age of the planet, interestingly, is astronomy. It's not even astrology, it's astronomy. It's a physical phenomenon in a physical world, which is our solar system. I'm going to present all this as fact, because this is how Sri Yukteswar and Yogananda presented it. I have no independent source beyond them, except the book that my friends wrote, one of whom is an astronomer. So he backed it up with a great deal of, there's a lot of evidence. Our whole solar system, it moves closer and farther away from the center of our galaxy. And in the ancient scriptures, they talk about the galaxy being this enormous source of energy. So when our whole solar system, and therefore our planet, moves closer to the center of that galaxy, the whole planet is enlivened. And therefore there's more energy coming in, and the consciousness is higher. When it moves away from the center of the galaxy, everything gets duller. Now, we're not talking about individuals, because self-realization, this is personal versus planetary. The planet has one reality, but the capacity for God realization never changes. It is just simply the backdrop against which the real drama, which is individual self-realization, takes place. And the masters come at every age, and they bring a message that is appropriate and that is helpful for that time. The whole cycle, as they tell us, is 24,000 years, and it's divided. This is a descending cycle. During these periods of time, understanding is lost. We hit the nadir, and then we start up the other side. Okay? Very simple picture. And there are Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. They're not evenly divided, because actually the higher ages are longer. This point down here, the nadir of this whole cycle, was 500 AD, which is interesting because Jesus came in when it was bad and getting worse. And because it was bad and getting worse, the disciples of Jesus did not live integrated into society. They went out into the desert, they went out into the caves, they went out into the monasteries, and they shut the door. Because there was no point in trying to fix society as a whole, and there was no possibility of, you can give me a better one? Thank you. And there was no possibility of raising the consciousness, of serving. In 500 AD, it began to shift, and we came into Kali Yuga. Kali means dark. It's the same as Mother Kali. We started in it, and in the year 1700, we hit a transition point. In the year 1900, we moved into the second age, which is where we are now, which is called Dwapara, which simply means second. Okay? Kali is the age of matter, and Dwapara is the age of energy. Now, again, as I say, there's lots more to say. Matter is fixed. Here is this, here's the eraser, here are my sunglasses, everything is completely separate. Here are the black people, here are the white people, here are the yellow people, here are the red people, here are the Africans, here are the people in Finland. Everybody's separate. Nobody understands anybody. Here are the Christians, here are the Muslims, here are the Hindus. Nobody understands anybody because matter is fixed. And that's where we've been. The gender identity, social identity, religious identity, racial identity, it's all fixed like this. And people who are committed to that are totally freaked out because all these forms are breaking down and everything is blending together. In the age of energy, we begin to understand that it's not the form it takes, it's the consciousness and the vibration that it has. Simple as that. So you meet people of another culture, of another race, who look different, and you realize, oh my goodness, we're just the same. Your face is different, your upbringing is different. I need Google Translate to talk to you. I was in the airport coming back from somewhere, and this 13-year-old boy comes up to me with his phone. It turns out they're from Albania, I think is where he was from. And he was using Google Translate because he points over here and there's this whole family. They had no idea where their gate was. They were on their way to Paris. They didn't know where they were. They didn't know how to find it, and so with his phone, we talked to each other, and I carried them over to their gate, like who would have thunk before such a thing could happen? But this is the world we live in now, where energy is just uniting us. And we go everywhere. I sit literally in my room, with my bed and my thing all around me, talking into my Apple computer, and it's simultaneously being translated into 4 languages in this Zoom call, right? They're listening in Bulgaria and in Russia and Ukraine, whatever that particular one was, hearing me in real time, because this is the age of energy. But the transitions are always tumultuous, and this one, especially starting in 1900, is very, very tumultuous, because this is the way Swami Kriyananda put it. As we move on this elliptical orbit toward the center of the galaxy, closer to it here, enormous energy is coming into this planet in the form of technology primarily. One of the ways it's coming in is technology, but also just awakening. I understand we have one child in the ashram here, little Sam, who's walking around, Sam has the karma to be the child here, and he'll grow up thinking that this is natural, that everybody loves each other and everybody loves him, and all these different faces are here, and we all come into the temple. Our community is well into the second generation is having their children now. So my housemate, as it happens, is 50 years younger than me, and his parents were good friends of mine, and he just grew up with this. His father would sing him to sleep with Swami's music, and at 2 years old, he would lie in their backyard and sing, "My Krishna is blue, the Tamil tree is blue." This is all that he remembers. To him, this is normal life. And of course, quite apart from whether you're raised in an ashram, if anything goes wrong with your mechanical devices, you ask your grandchildren about it, don't you? Because you don't know what it is, and they just pick it up and go bim, 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 and hand it back to you. When I was in my 30s, maybe, Swami Kriyananda's mother was 80, and I knew her, and for a period of time, I lived in their house when her husband was a little ill. She always introduced me as her young friend. And I thought it was so amusing at the time, but now I am just the same. These are my young friends. And I would help her with a world that had moved away from where she was, because they were born into it. Not only were they raised in it, but they were born for it, because we're always born for it. But in this age, with all this energy coming in, everybody is feeling it. And what happens in transition ages is, especially this one, because we're going from matter to energy, so a lot has to be torn apart. So very, very naughty children of Divine Mother get to come in now. If you have the karma to destroy things, and you need a divine opportunity to see if destroying things makes you happy, because that's the personal development side of this conversation. Personal spiritual development is trying to find out where happiness really comes from. And Yogananda said something that is really quite chilling in its implications. He says, anything that you're not drawn to do now is because you tried it and you found out that it didn't make you happy. So now you don't want to do it anymore. This includes murder, for example, or thievery, or debauchery of any kind. If you're not interested in it, it's because I tried that and it didn't work. Because we all have to come through these different stages. And if I will at least introduce some of that side of it, how these stages develop, how we gradually expand our awareness. We expand our awareness from our experience. That's the thing we have to understand. If you think about it, especially if you're a parent, nobody takes anybody else's word for it. We just don't. If we do take the advice, it's because it resonates. Or we may take the advice because we're cowardly and we don't have the nerve to do anything except what we're told, which is not the same as being free. Being cowardly is not freedom. Come you're a man, no passive stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Just to be obedient is not the same as being wise. So we learn from our own experience. That's why we suffer so much. Because we have to have the experience. We have to find out. So in a transition age like this one, a lot of souls are getting to find out whether or not it makes them happy to destroy things. And because we're not in charge, and not last night, but the night before, or maybe it was also last night, or I think that was this morning, we equate good with pleasurable. The ego says good equals easy and pleasurable. The soul says good equals that which makes me free. Right? And that means that destroys my delusions because that's what makes me free. So we call it suffering because it's not easy and it's not pleasurable. But Divine Mother just says, it's not that she doesn't care about our suffering, but suffering, she understands, is the road to freedom. And one of the things we have to learn is that if there was an easier way for us to learn, she loves us. She would make it easier. And if this is what we get, it's because we need it. So these rowdy souls need to be allowed to destroy. And, there have been visions, and Catherine Emmerich, talking about this period of time, said that hell will open and many demons will roam the earth. How about that one? Somewhere else it was quoted to me, I've never read this, that Yogananda said, that many demons will inhabit the planet during this transition. The awful thing, I say awful, the challenging thing, is that every soul is equally loved by Divine Mother. And anything that you know that is not a good idea anymore is because you tried it and it didn't work. But all this energy coming in, everyone is feeling it, and people are taking it in two different directions. Those of us who are in tune with the light are becoming ever more magnetized to understand our spiritual selves, to develop our spiritual practices, to share spiritual teachings, to live according to high ideals. It feels urgent at this point. Most of the time, society is shaped like a cigar. Few good people on this side, a few bad people on this side, and most everybody just hangs out and is interested in their children and their meals. Their meals, their money, and their children. That's what people think about. And then their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, which is all perfectly fine when everything is just going along. But right now what's happening is the middle is very thin, and it's being polarized. And the dark is much darker, the shadow is much stronger, and the light is much more compelling, because everything is being energized because we're moving this way. Now here is the really good news. All the people who are holding on to this one, and if you look through the politics of the whole world, what to speak of the politics of the United States, this is what it's all about. I want things to be the way they always used to be. Women need to stay in their place. Genders need to be fixed. Religions need to be separated. And of course, my way is right. Countries need to be separated. And meanwhile, the children are on the internet talking to people all over the world, making friends everywhere. And so we have this huge conflict. As it happens, the people who are very determined that the future will look like the past, that's basically what they're doing. The future will look like the past. They seem to be the political leaders, and they seem to, and they have the weapons. They're the military and the political, and they have nuclear weapons, which is no joke. Because as we've come into Dwapara, all of a sudden people are seeing potentials for energy that were always there. Swami Kriyananda's father was an oil geologist for what was then Standard Oil. Swamiji was born in Romania because his father was posted in Romania, and he was developing the oil resources of the country of Romania, which it's easy to retroactively criticize, but at the time it was an enormous positive thing because there was this new source of energy that could bring all these advancements beyond just moving things physically. I don't know if they still use the measurement, but they used to measure the strength of a car in horsepower, okay? Because the only way people could imagine something moving was this electrified or this mechanical thing can go as fast as 4 horses. So it'd say that the engine was 4 horsepower. Do any of you know how strong a horse is now? You know? Because it was just a whole shift. So he went to Romania, oil was bubbling out of the ground. It had been bubbling out of the ground forever. But because we were in the distance from this higher age, nobody knew what to do with it. It was always there to be discovered, but the planet wasn't at the point where it could be discovered. So he went and developed the energy resources for that. So one of the characteristics of Dwapara is this enormous development of subtle energy, moving away from fixed physical realities into subtle energies. And that if you think from 1900 to now, the whole world has completely shifted. Just from when I first went to Ananda village, no computers, no email, nothing like that. We didn't, cell phone, we didn't even have phones where I was living, but, and now, I'm in Costa Rica on a tour in the tropics like 25 years ago, or maybe when cell phones first came out, and all of a sudden my guide, so much for my romantic view of this place, he pulls his cell phone out and starts making his next appointment. We're in the middle of the rainforest somewhere. Fantastic. They just skipped the whole, infrastructure stage and went right to the energy stage with what they're doing. So we have all this technology, and we have all these rowdy children of Divine Mother who are thinking how we can use that technology to protect the past. And you can see there's a lot of force going that way, but simultaneously, this tremendous, because many of us are taking the same energy and turning it to the light. And Yogananda tells us the rowdy children are going to make a lot more violence before it's done. But in the end, or in the beginning, I should say, the light will triumph, because there is no question it's going to be the age of energy, and we're moving into it. Now here's the last part of this, which is important. The way things manifest in the material world, the way things manifest is, if you think of it in terms of levels of reality, levels of creation, causal, astral, physical. Causal is the level of thought and ideas. Astral is the energy plane. And the material world is the world we're living in. The gentleman who was speaking yesterday here, and unfortunately I was not aware of who he was. I would have come to hear him for sure. He was talking about the world he entered after he died. And it was the energy universe, because that's where we go. This is where the chakras and the karma comes in. Physical body dies, but the self is actually consciousness, and it just steps out of the body. I always wear these, more or less same blue clothes. And so I get identified with these blue clothes. People know who I am and so on like that. But I take them off at night. I'm not blue underneath this. In fact, I'm very deliberately not blue under this. My pajamas are shades of, but not quite the same, just to give me a little break from it. Okay. But I take it off so casually, and I don't think that I'm lost when I take off my clothes and put on my pajamas. And so the same is, we take off our body, and we take it off just as casually as we take off a suit of clothes. And we are there just as intensely, individually, as we are when we change our clothes. Except because Divine Mother is a trickster. we don't remember until that moment comes. And then we say, oh yeah, how could I have forgotten? And we say, I swear I'll never forget again. But we do. There we have it. Yes, did you want to ask? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Causal, astral, material. And so let me just carry that out for a minute. Everything that happens, if you think about it, begins first because you think about it. Every one of you is here because at some point the thought came to you, oh, I think I'll come here. Maybe it happened 30 years ago and you've lived here ever since. Maybe it was 3 days ago. I think I'll come here. Then you put energy into coming here. I wonder if they have a room for me. I wonder what the programs are. I wonder if I have enough money in my bank account to buy the ticket, to pay for the fees. So you apply energy to the thought. If you only had the thought and did not apply energy to it, the thought would just die. How many thoughts do we have that we don't put energy into? And we don't put energy into them, so they never manifest. But you have the thought, you put energy into it, then it manifests. So from this perspective, when things are manifesting, it looks like it's a really big deal, doesn't it? But it's the last stage of manifestation, not the first. And so we are in this transition where the material manifestation is still, there's a lot of power in the past. But the thought forms and the energy that's being put out is all for the future. You see? So there's two important, well, more than two, but a couple of important points here that we really need to understand. First, Divine Mother's plan is not for it to be easy and pleasurable. This is a cosmic phenomenon that's been going on forever. Just to be very quick, if you go across here, you find things like the pyramids in Egypt. Nobody has any idea about how those pyramids were built. We have from my generation, the 10 Commandments movie by Cecil B. DeMille, which is probably such ancient history, no one has seen it. But you had all these poor Jewish slaves dragging those stones, up like this. It's still very vivid in my mind. It's impossible that those were built by a whole bunch of people dragging those stones up. They were built by the power of sound, by thought movement, who knows? Because we've been too low. Let's say the pyramids are here. We're too low in terms of consciousness. They're going down, we're coming up. And as we get higher here, we'll begin to understand what's on the other side. Yeah, except they were losing understanding. We're gaining it, coming back to it. Fascinating. But it also, you see how it changes your whole perspective? Now, Yogananda and Sri Yukteswar said, humanity as a whole is not evolving. Because real consciousness is individual. Individuals are evolving. Individuals are waking up. Individuals, our destiny, this is the personal evolution part, which is the purpose of our material incarnation is because we have karma, karma is an unlearned lesson. Something we don't understand about the very simple question, where does true happiness come from? What really causes suffering? We just don't understand. I think happiness comes when I finally have a loving partner, someone who really understands me, who treats me like this, like that. And then, we get one, we get two, but three are missing, so we trade that one in, and we try this one over here. Then we get this one and this one, but it's missing these three. And then finally, we just close up our hearts and give up the whole thing. But deeply inside of us, we still think it'll make us happy. These are big, unlearned lessons. And I can make a joke out of it, but it is not funny. It's not at all funny when we're going through it. I think I need money. I think I need to control my environment. I think I need to be respected. I think I need to be recognized as an artist. Make the story. And all of it says something outside of my own consciousness is required for me to feel good inside my own consciousness. And the masters say, and we're reciting all these verses here, all these Sanskrit verses, nothing exists but the divine. I am complete in myself. Bliss is my own nature. Everything can be let go of, on and on. But how much do we actually believe that? This is where karma and the chakras get involved. The chakras are the astral body. And so when the physical body falls away, who we really are is that energy pattern. And the karma is what we haven't yet learned about our true nature. And then that karma compels us to reincarnate. And we're there in the astral world, and it's time for us to incarnate. And our master or our angels, our guardian angels, we are surrounded by angels. We have no idea. We have no idea how blessed and loved we are at all times. So we go between incarnations, we go to the astral world. then what happens is we get restless. Think of it like this. You have an evening off, and you say, tonight, I have nothing else to do. I'm going to do a long session of yoga postures, then I'm going to do chanting, then I'm going to do my mantra, then I'm going to meditate silently, then I'm going to read a couple of good books like this. We're like into maybe the fourth posture in our series, and we think, gosh, I'm a little hungry. And we start, we're holding the pose, whatever it is, and we're going mentally through the refrigerator. We realize there's nothing in it. We realize that there's a new pizza place that I just heard about. It's not very far away. I could just get up and now. Then the next thing you know, you're in the pizza parlor. You run into a friend who, you sit down with your friends, then they're off to do something else, and you come home at midnight, and you see your yoga mat, and you vaguely remember what your intention was, right? So we're in the astral world. We're perfectly happy. The astral worlds are homogeneous vibrations. The material world is heterogeneous vibrations, which means you can be sitting on the bus next to a murderer. Just all of us, very, very mixed consciousness, especially at this stage when we're in this kind of yoga. So we're just in the astral world, everything is dandy, and then we suddenly notice that one of those we thought might be our perfect partner has just reincarnated again. And then we notice that our arch rival has reincarnated next door to them. And we get kind of panicky, because, if they get to them first, what's going to become of me? And then bingo, you're in somebody's womb, And all of a sudden, you're just started again. Because we have karma, we have unlearned lessons that can only be learned on the material plane. However, that's a very conscious process. So some of my images are contradicting each other, but that's what it feels like. We have one intention this way, but we have karma that pulls us that way. That's the energy pattern in the chakras. But when it's time for us to incarnate, we sit with those in some form, whatever that looks like when you don't have a body to sit with, but you're there together. And basically, you could incarnate anywhere. Swami Kriyananda asked Yogananda, do we always reincarnate on the same planet? Oh no, Yogananda said. There are countless inhabited planets to go to. He just completely dissolved the myth that we're the only inhabited planet. I mean, really, think about it. In all of creation, this is the only one. Really, first of all, there aren't very many of us, But nonetheless, no, there's countless planets to go to, and they're all at different stages of enlightenment. And they all have different realities. And so we survey, what unlearned lessons do I have within me? What external conditions will be ideal for me to learn those lessons? See, we think ease and pleasure. The question is not, how can I have the most easy and pleasurable life that I could have? No. It's how can I make the most spiritual progress? How can I use my lifetime? And when we're in our soul consciousness, and not our limited consciousness, we know that that's the point. So we survey the whole scene. What unlearned lessons do I have? Okay, here's one. Evil people scare me. Evil people make me think that my happiness depends on external conditions. I don't like evil people. I don't like suffering. I want to just be comfortable. I don't want anything to bother me. Oh, is that the highest truth? Do you really want to commit another lifetime to trying to control the uncontrollable without reference to divine wisdom? I don't think so. So we say, I have an idea, planet Earth is really in a mess. I've sent down a lot of demons and they all have nuclear weapons. Let's all go to planet Earth. For two reasons. One, because it'll scare the bejesus out of us and we'll get to practice that. We'll get to witness a lot of suffering, and we'll get to understand whether suffering has a divine purpose. Like that. Oh, and here's another idea. Maybe we could help. Maybe I could be one who clings to the light in an age that is just racing toward atheism and self-destruction. So here we are. And we're here because the planetary evolution matches perfectly our personal evolution. It's a perfect opportunity. And of course, once we're here, we forget, because that's part of the game, because we have to start over and really face into it. And if we knew the end of the story, the Super Bowl was last night, and for those of you who paid any attention, of course, it was right in my backyard. The San Francisco team was there, and it was a real cliffhanger until the absolute last second, and it was just like, what a great game. What fun for everyone. But if everybody knew before it started how it would end, it wouldn't have been nearly as much fun. We might not think that being on this planet, not knowing how it's going to end, is going to be much fun. But Divine Mother has a weird sense of humor. That's the only way you can put it. It's just the way it is, because we learn. For starting in 1986 was the first time that I traveled out of the Western world and went to India for the first time. I was part of a group of 4, and we led pilgrimage tours to India based on the story of the autobiography of a yogi. Called it In the Footsteps of the Master, and went to his home in Calcutta and Lahiri Mahashaya's home and Sri Yukteswar's place. And I had never been to India before. Actually, 3 of the 4 leaders had never been to the country, but I knew the philosophy. That was my job. But it was the first time I was outside of the Western world, and I saw, especially then, in 1986, India was still closed to foreign corporations. They were still following the Gandhian idea of being completely self-contained. 2 years later, Pepsi-Cola came into India and launched from the Taj Mahal. And that was the beginning of modern India, right? And by the next year, when we got to Varanasi, there were ads for Coca-Cola on the sides of the little boats that were taking us down the Ganges. And everything changed. But nonetheless, especially in those first years, we saw things that you never saw if you didn't leave what they call the developed world. People sleeping on the streets. We're in the Oberoi Grand Hotel in Calcutta for 5 days, and you're up in this gorgeous room. I developed an unfortunate taste for luxury hotels. It's my one terrible vice in the material world, is I love luxury hotels, but beyond that. So you're in your room, which is more elegant than anything I'd ever stayed in my life. You're looking down, from the 5th floor, and you can see the family that's living on the square feet of concrete. And you can watch them for the 5 days that you're there. Just live their lives out there. They've since reorganized the entrance, but you would come out of the entrance and you would just be engulfed by beggars. Because, we were really good prospects. And of course, we poured out our wallets to them. We couldn't help it. But what was interesting, because my job was to keep people emotionally balanced during the whole time we were there for 28 days. I did this for 20 years. People had such different reactions to seeing suffering. Some people were just completely at ease. They would talk with the beggars, they would talk with the children, they would, be interested in the lepers, just very much at ease. They would behave very appropriately. They would be generous, but not crazy. Just perfect. Other people, total panic. And we had to literally surround such people when we would go out on the street, because they would just be panic-stricken. So I began to think, having the mind that I have, good Lord, what's the difference here? And this is what I came to, and I believe it's true. Some of us have come to understand, have been humble and honest enough in our introspection to come to understand that suffering is a great teacher. And how many times have you had to say, it was awful? I've had a couple of what I call near-death experiences, and not the good kind, like Dr. Alexander was talking about. Not the good going into the astral world kind of thing, but near-death in this side of the world, because the grief was almost more than I could live through. But golly darn it, I would never have learned what I've learned otherwise. And it just annoys the heck out of me, but what can I say? It's the truth. If I hadn't been kicked that hard and stomped on when I was down, I would never have stood up as a better person. So if one understands the principle that everything happens for a good reason, and it's not what happens to us, but it's what we do with what happens to us. that makes the difference. And those who were reconciled to their own suffering could perceive even extreme, seemingly extreme, suffering in someone else and just say, all right, Divine Mother knows what she's doing. If there was an easier way to get that soul to freedom, God would take her through that way of doing it. When my parents were in the last years of their lives, they passed within 2 years of each other, almost 20 years ago now. I ended up being much more involved in the end of their life than I thought I was going to be. My sister lived closer, but her health wasn't good, and I ended up basically commuting from Northern to Southern California for a few years there. Just even once or twice a week, I'd go up and down to LA. Fortunately, there was enough money for us to be able to deal with that. But at first, this was a big learning for me. I panicked, and I just moved in with my executive abilities and took over my parents' life, down to how they stored the food in the refrigerator. I mean, I was just going to make it my way. You might be correct in surmising that they did not appreciate this. I was there to take charge, and they were not happy about it. So I gradually, I'm slow, but I gradually began to think maybe the problem is me. And this was a question of suffering. And then I realized, oh my gosh, this is not my karma, this is their karma. They were in their 80s. They had made lots of decisions, and all those decisions had brought them right to that moment. And what was happening to them was exactly what they needed. And I was looking at it as if I had suddenly been transported from where I was standing, bingo, into their lives. But of course I wasn't. I wasn't 80 then. And it wasn't my karma, it was theirs. And here's where I went farther than that. I have a lot of willpower, I have a lot of energy, I have a lot of executive ability. I like to help. Sometimes all those qualities are welcome, and sometimes those qualities are annoying, as you can well imagine. And this is what I also realized. Oh, I'm not always just helping people. Their discomfort makes me uncomfortable, and for me to be happy, I need for them to be different. Oh, is this really altruism, or is this selfishness? My nephew said to me at one point when he was about 18, he's my sister's son, he said to me about his mother, rightly so. She had some health challenges, and also she was, 30 years older than him. He said, Mom thinks if I'm out with my friends and we're, 10 miles from the city and the car runs out of gas, she thinks that's a problem. He said, we think it's just an adventure because I'm young and I have energy and I'm creative and such things are fun. And I thought, well, that's exactly true, isn't it? Right. And so her genuine concern for her son is also, inevitably, I'm uncomfortable, you have to change. So then I went a step further, and I thought, even at that stage, 20 years ago of my life, I'm not afraid of my own karma. I mean, I'm not anxious for near-death experiences to happen on this side of life, but nonetheless, I'm not afraid of it. Because it's a divine law and I know it's true. Well, Mother Teresa of Calcutta said, God will never send you a challenge bigger than you can handle. And then she added, but sometimes I wish God didn't have so much confidence in me. Right? So both of those things are true. So I said, I'm not afraid of my own karma. So when I see someone else living out their karma and I'm afraid for them, they feel rightly disrespected. You see how subtle that is? So when we look at this world and we see, and there's no way any compassionate person would say horrible things happening to people. But is this happening outside of the will of God? Oh, that's why there's so few of us, really. The teaching of self-realization, of karma, reincarnation, the chakras, and the yugas is extraordinarily challenging. And if karma is true anywhere, and if God's will is true anywhere, it has to be true everywhere. Yes? Who is us? Question is, who is us? I mean anyone who is receiving this energy and is using it for compassion, generosity, and expansion of sympathy. And I've now, in these last few years, been in quite a few countries. My friend Dunbar made a list of how many countries he'd been in, and I'm up to 30 or closer to 40. This one adds one or two. I think at the end of this year plus this, it'll be about 40, which by this point, it just is the way it is. It's just the only issue is how long it takes to get there on the airplane and whether you can understand my English, whether I have to have a translator. I was very pessimistic before I started. I think I said this. But now that I have been in many countries, I am extremely optimistic. There is an enormous wave of light being transmitted into this planet, received by individuals, and manifested in the most interesting and creative ways. You know, some of us are self-realizationists or some form of that, practicing techniques of awakening. And some are out planting flowers or making new kinds of plants or taking, there's something called the Cloud Society where every day you can get a picture of clouds somewhere in the world. I thought, isn't that just wonderful? Has no purpose except to spread the light. So I take that us is a gigantic us. Anyone who is actually trying to bring in the future instead of trying to make the future look like the past. That's the only dividing line that I make there. And then I think the most powerful thought forms are the thought forms that are taking us toward an understanding of our relationship to a higher power and that we are one with all that is. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda makes this extraordinarily bold statement. He says, one of the figures in the book is Babaji, who is a deathless Himalayan master who holds his body for this entire cycle of creation. This is, again, beyond my pay grade to say yes or no, but so many things that I have been able to verify that Yogananda said make me believe him. So there's Babaji. He says, Babaji and Jesus together, the West and the East, have planned the spiritual salvation of this age, that they are very concerned about racial hatred, about religious bigotry, about excessive materialism, about greed, about the rejection of a higher reality than the ego. This is the problem. You know, when I was in India in 1986, in that bus in the middle of the night, you always landed in the middle of the night, looking out the window at these lumps on the sidewalk that I realized were people sleeping, I thought to myself, we have all the technology, we have all the money in the world. We could solve this like that. The problem is we don't want to. It's not a problem of anything about resources, it's about the human heart. And I was already long since committed to this, but I realized, and I still feel it, I am one of the most politically active people I know because I am constantly helping, trying to help change the human heart. That's all. Once the human heart changes, and that's what's happening, you see. We're just finding ourselves unable to remain separate, not just from each other, but also separate from all of creation. And we're beginning to understand, we're beginning to answer the question properly. How much is enough? How much do I need? You know, the world has gone crazy with its, you know? But I see us as like we're a separate race kind of going down the middle. Swami Kriyananda said, after they, Divine Mother's rowdy children, basically blow the thing to bits, which they're, with all due respect, they're very likely to do. We'll just rise from the ashes. And they'll be very surprised to see us because they don't really know we're here. I mean, they don't think we have any power because we're the causal astral level right now. But we're the future. And it's a very broad we. And that's why I'm here. That's why you're here.
I would like to understand when you have encountered or the bigger we encounter some of Mother's
Rowdy children.
children.
Yeah.
What should we do?
It, of course, depends.
Sure.
It is not wisdom to throw yourself into a lost cause unless you know it is your destiny to die trying. There are no rules because it has to be, what am I supposed to learn in this situation and how can I best serve? Sometimes when Yogananda was in India, before he came to America in 1920, two young Indian men came to him and they wanted Yogananda to lead a revolt against the British, an armed revolt. He said, no. He said, India will be freed by nonviolent means in my lifetime. But the two men, he didn't stop the two men from doing it. They stole rifles, went in armed, and both of them were killed. So later, when Swami Kriyananda heard the story, he said, why didn't you tell them to stop? He said, oh, it was their karma to try. So it was important for them to have the courage to stand up. Sometimes you have to just stand up and have the courage, and that's that. At other times, you have to have the common sense to know that my life is valuable, human life is valuable. And if I throw my life away, I'm not helping anyone. So it all depends on which way is forward for you. Sometimes if we have to learn to speak the truth, you have to stand up no matter what. If you're good at speaking the truth and you need to keep your peace, and why should I argue with fools? You have to learn to keep your mouth shut. So there is no answer, but the question is, what am I afraid of? What am I not afraid of? Which way is expanding my capacities, and which way is contracting my capacities? And you also have to be realistic. I put out an Instagram reel. My friend Ishani does this Instagram account for me. I give her the content and she does her magic with it. And in it I talked about negativity. And it was a very controversial reel. It was both, is real the right word? Yes, look at me. Okay. Both because many people liked it, many people didn't. I said, if you're faced with negative energy that is bigger than your capacity to convert with your positive energy, if your positive magnetism is less than their negative magnetism, run away. Do not put yourself in a position where your light will be extinguished because someone is more powerful than you. And I even went so far as to say, don't even pray for them. Because if their negativity is stronger than your positive, you don't want to form a link. You can say to Divine Mother, you take care of them, but don't concentrate on them. Don't make a link. Now, of course, in 90 seconds, you can't deal with every condition, so some people took great exception, but it's true. You have to be realistic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
So this is related,
Okay.
I think, to her question. When you talk about suffering and karma, so why would you help someone who's suffering if it's their karma to suffer?
Because they may have the karma to get help from you. And it may be expansive for you to try to help them. So when you help with the understanding that we're all acting in the right spirit, that's quite different than saying, I must fix it. I'm afraid. We tend to want to expunge that which is part of us. They say, if you judge someone, not just observe, but judge someone, it's because you have the same fault yourself. Now, that's very simplistic, but this is what it is. If I have a tendency to be, well, let's use one that comes out a lot. Maybe I have homosexual tendencies, and I'm terribly embarrassed and ashamed about them, so I go on a campaign against homosexuals because I need to expunge homosexuality from reality. And the actual thing is that it's in me and it frightens me and I need to expunge it. I need to control somewhere. Whereas someone else who has such a tendency or whatever it is would just observe it. And they might not even know they have it themselves, but it doesn't frighten them to see it. So what was that about? Where did we start when I got there?
Suffering. Helping people.
Helping other people and judging other people. So it's usually expansive for us because, see, people misread this when you say it's God's will. And you think, well, therefore I should just be cold and walk by. But that's terrible for you. You have to be compassionate, and then you have to be, Yogananda's phrase, practical in your idealism. Okay? So I'm very compassionate toward people, but I know that I only have so much energy. I can only do so much. So I can bless people, though. I see, homeless people on the street pushing their carts full of things, talking to themselves, and I say a prayer for them when I see them. But I can't do anything, because if I spend all my time trying to help them, I couldn't do what I was born to do. So that's the balance point. And it is their karma to be helped. They have the karma to suffer, and then they have the good karma to be helped. And you get the good karma of being the one to help them. Yogananda said the channel is blessed by that which flows through it. Compassion and love flows through you, you become compassionate and loving. And then that's your joy. And you learn the joy of giving, which is a step up from the joy of not giving. Fair enough? Okay.
I will think about that.
Okay. You can come back. I'm here for 2 more days. The microphone needs to come over here. I understand that these are very challenging. That's what I said when there's not many of us. This is a very challenging teaching. And I've had many, 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 many years to integrate it. And so it's very important for you to stand in what's real for you. I would encourage you not to reject what I say, but don't accept it just because I said it. You have to, this was what I said last night, Swami Kriyananda with his own guru. I accepted what Yogananda said unhesitatingly, but not unquestioningly. And many things that Swami Kriyananda said to me, I just put on the shelf. I could not hang them in the middle of my closet because they were too confusing, but nor could I reject them, because the chances were that he was right and I was wrong, but I didn't see where I was wrong. So I just boxed it up and I put it over here. And then over the course of many years, just like I would take something down, I said, well, this fits perfectly. Why haven't I been wearing it all this time? Because I had changed. And when I had more experience, then all of a sudden, oh yeah, that's really true, isn't it? I just didn't know it. If I'd thrown it away, I would have kept myself limited to what I already knew. If I had accepted it just because he said it, I would have been insincere. So you have to be absolutely authentic and simultaneously humble and receptive. Okay? So if you think I'm wrong, just cling to it until you think I'm not. Okay? If you ever do. Let's go here first.
This isn't my question, but it's something somebody said last week that I listened to that I thought was quite beautiful. Was a woman said, why am I suffering so much? I'm in a wheelchair. I've had terrible experiences. I have great suffering. And the person that was talking to her or answering the question said, it's not about your suffering. It's about you giving the people around you the opportunity to help you.
Well,
and I thought that was kind of beautiful.
That's another way to think about
But
it.
that's not my question. My question is, last night you referred to, at the end, when you're getting ready to transition and leave your physical body, what you take with you will be the moments of time that you spent in the highest elevated state with the light. And I've been reflecting on that all morning, walking on the beach, and wondering if, and I don't know really how to put this question, all I could see was the images of perhaps someone who's achieved a state of self-realization, having merged completely into the light, so that they are living the immortal life. They don't have to repeat incarnations again. And then someone who is had experiences in the light, but is transitioning, takes with them those experiences in the light. Can you say something more about that?
What you mean that there was a very, very advanced soul that was a disciple of Yogananda, very advanced, but still had some things that they didn't understand. And some of their weaknesses were impacting the life that we were living. It was complicated. And so it was like, how could they be so advanced and so not advanced at the same time? And Swami's answer was extremely interesting. He said, you can have many discrete compartments in what with this case he was calling it your subconscious, your below conscious level. And just because one area, let's say it's jealousy or disappointment in some, not being recognized, something like that, you can have sort of a tough karma there, but that doesn't mean that all these other compartments aren't perfectly clear. So that's how it can work. And then you may have to come back to finish this piece of karma if it's karma that can only be solved on the material plane. But you will bring with you everything else, which means that you will have good karma. You'll be born into auspicious circumstances. You'll be given great opportunities. Swami Vishnu Devananda met Sivananda when he was 16 years old and had an instant recognition and never looked back. So, I mean, you can see there was a tremendous amount. He came mostly to help, but that's part of what makes the compartments clear. The question is not what can I get, but what can I give? But we still have karma that brings us here. So we end up working on this plane instead of on another.
And so the light that you have, because what I also understand is that what you take with you is the love that you've become.
Yes, precisely.
And so you're equating the love to the light.
Another way of saying it is our consciousness is our reality, and our level of consciousness, when the physical body comes off, we are the vibration of our consciousness, and that consciousness is determined by the energy patterns of the chakras. The energy patterns of the chakras are the accumulation of every thought, action, deed that we did. You can't game the system, and it's not a matter of what you think. That's why people who may be total determined atheists might be much more advanced, because they actually act and think and feel in unity. And some so-called spiritual people may be tremendously self-centered and egotistical. And so God doesn't care what we call ourselves. And the chakras don't listen. They just accept the vibration, whatever it is. So we go to an astral plane that matches our energy. We reincarnate in a way that is going to serve us. Is that helpful? Yeah, okay. Swamiji talked once about a group of beggars that he saw on the street in Calcutta. And he said one of them was this girl of about 10. And he said she was totally regal. And she was there begging, and you could just see that her thought form was, what am I doing here? And his perception of her was that she'd been a very wealthy, extremely selfish person. And as a consequence was thrown back to being a beggar. But she still remembered being a royal, rich person, and she was here with all these low consciousness people. So she would beg, it's just like, here you are.
Thank you so much. I am kind of embarrassed to ask this question. I'm just mustering some courage to ask this.
Believe me, we've all done it. Go ahead.
I had a realization while you are talking about the cycles that I am more attracted anything towards matter, not towards energy.
Uh-huh.
So I'm just wondering, where would be the first step for me to start practicing going away? Well, I have a I understand it, like I am very attracted to matter. I mean, I'm going behind, like going backwards in that cycle that I see than forward. So I have to start somewhere going forward, where would be the
Well,
best place
my dear
to
friend,
start?
you're sitting here. You could be in a nightclub somewhere. You could be somewhere. You could be a drug dealer somewhere on the street. So you're talking relative. You're not talking absolute. You're here listening to me. So obviously you sat through the whole thing and you didn't fall asleep. So apparently you appeared to be attentive. So either you're a good actor or you were actually interested, one or the other. So what you're saying is there's lots of players here. In the way Swami Kriyananda taught us, we're very easy about ourselves. It's like, yeah, I have lots of karma that I'm still working out. And I just need to be who I am and enjoy who I am. A friend of mine who was seriously debauched, not just mildly debauched, but seriously debauched, with lots of things that were not the kind of thing you'd bring into an ashram. And one of his favorite quotes from Yogananda was, well, if you're going to do it anyway, just take the Guru and God with you. So as he put it, he said, so I took Yogananda, I took Master to a lot of places he might not have gone on his own. But that kind of self-acceptance, that kind of trust in the love and friendship of the Master, eventually brought him out of all of it. Whereas if he just sat and felt guilty and just suppressed all his energy and tried to pretend that he was better than he was, he would not only, this is again how Swami put it, there's two levels to what we think of as unsavory or undesirable behavior. There's the it. You know, I want fancy clothes, I want people to recognize me, I want to be a rock star, I want to be an internet influencer, you know, whatever it might be. And there's the doing of it, there's the it. And you think, well, there might be higher uses for my energy, but this is where my energy is going. Then there's the complex you build about not being what you think you should be. The it is usually not a problem. You'll have the experience, you'll learn. The complex, much harder to unravel. The guilt, the shame, the I should be different. So just don't bother. I mean, my thought was it's better to sin enthusiastically in public. Because then at least there it is. You know, this is who I am, take me as I am. And it's a certain faith in God. Okay, so that's my suggestion. Wherever the microphone is, over here now. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I think you just answered my question. I was thinking about how we all grow and we have growth, but along the way we make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And when we make those mistakes, sometimes they hurt the people we love. Mm-hmm. And just, I think you answered it with the it and the complex.
Yeah.
It just was like, how do we rectify that karma in a way, I guess? But
you just have to keep on keeping on. And just, a friend of mine did something thoughtless, caused Swami Kriyananda a great deal of trouble. It just caused a big kerfuffle that took him a lot of energy. The gentleman in the center, the lady in the center, has been asking for the microphone for a long time. It was a kerfuffle, and it caused him a lot of trouble. And so about a week or two later, he noticed her moping around. And he said, what's wrong with you? Why are you in such a mood? Oh, she said, I feel so badly about what I did. It caused so much trouble for you and so much difficulty, blah, blah, like that. And he said to her, his response was, how egoic. And she got kind of feisty about that. I'm not being egotistical. I'm feeling bad. That's not egotism. He said, you're so shocked that you could make a mistake that 2 weeks later you're still worshiping it. Of course you make mistakes. Like, what is the big news about this? If we weren't going to make mistakes, we wouldn't be here. It's just, I mean, when you think of it like that, of course we make mistakes, and it's a matter of self-honesty and humility to take it casually. I don't mean we take it lightly, meaning that we have to pay attention, and if it was a wrong action, we need to remember and try to do our best. But we also just have to take it lightly. It's just what happens. And we just let it pass. Yes.
Hello. When you, kind of a combination of these questions here, as we're transitioning into an energy from a matter, I was thinking of one of your examples when you were in San Francisco in the room and you were able to read. So you may have gotten fired carnally right here, in that moment of time, but you were still on this spiritual journey that you had accomplished by being able to read that book. And so as we live in this duality and we're going into energy, an energy space, how do you live in the freedom of the energy without trying to control the outcome, whether it's the refrigerator or whatever the things that you were trying to control during those times? How do you release the control to live in the flow of the energy, but still be in the carnal world?
Okay, so let me start with this. Okay. Just because we're moving into a higher age does not automatically mean that our consciousness will be raised. And this is planetary versus personal. The planet is doing what it's doing, but we have the absolute freedom to either rise or fall. It's just a background. That's why Jesus Christ could incarnate at Kali Yuga at its worst and getting worser, but he was still completely free, and all his disciples were free, and many, many great souls and great, saints incarnated with him. The planet was low, the consciousness was high. The consciousness is getting higher. Our consciousness can stay as low as we want it to stay. So there's nothing automatic. This is like this backdrop here. I've been sitting there and looking at this wonderful picture of Sivananda on this side. He and I have become friends over this, and I didn't know him as well until we've been sitting here. He's the backdrop. And that backdrop, I can draw from that backdrop, but my consciousness is still my responsibility. I could also sit here and not think about it at all. It's not automatic. And how do we balance the material and the spiritual, which is really what you're asking? 1 minute at a time. There was a gentleman, a very good friend of mine, who came to many of my classes, and he often asked very good questions. Well, at least he often asked active questions. And after about 10 years, I finally figured out every question he was asking was the same question. And the question was this: isn't there an easier way? And he always formed it in all kinds of different ways. Or, isn't there a shortcut? No. It's just moment by moment. Yogananda actually said, take care of the minutes, and incarnations will take care of themselves. So it's just, we're building the pattern in our chakras on a minute by minute basis. And if there was an easier way, Divine Mother would tell us. We all think this is a bum system, but all the masters say it isn't. So what can I say? Okay? One more?
Hi.
Uh-huh.
Hi. I haven't talked into this. This might be a little bit out of the, but not really. I've been told, or I've heard, or I've learned somewhere that people that commit suicide reincarnate and start all over again in that lifetime of lessons.
Is that the question?
That's the question.
Okay,
For
so
example, a friend's great aunt died, and she was like the hero of the family. Everybody idolized her, and her son was codependent with her right up to her death. So after she died, he committed suicide,
Right.
put himself in a coffin, and sent a note out like, "I'm done." And I thought, that's terrible.
Okay, let's deal with this.
Okay.
Now, I always like to be very gentle with certain subjects, and suicide is one of them, because I don't know you. So I don't know what might be in this room. And I don't want to be even slightly cavalier, because it's a stunning and difficult experience, no matter how it comes. Okay? There are different reasons. Okay, start with the fact. The karma is intense, and lessons have to be learned, but Divine Mother loves us. And so there's nothing cruel about this. And people commit suicide for many different reasons. Some do it out of despair. Some do it out of spite. Some do it out of anger. So why you choose to end your life is a very, very important part of the story. So it's not just a dogma, this is what happens. That's the past, where everything is matter instead of a question of consciousness. The many traditional religions have absolute rules about suicide, but self-realization doesn't. It's an error for the very simple reason, it doesn't help. You kill your body, but whatever your consciousness was when you made that decision, gosh darn, you still have it. And so if it worked, it would be a fine system. I have no interest in this world, I'll just leave it. But it doesn't work, because killing the body, you can't kill the self. So the person simply has whatever consciousness they had that drove them to it. That's why the reason why you do it makes a great deal of difference, because whatever the lesson is. And then what happens is you have to learn what you didn't understand. You have to get the courage or the sympathy, the compassion for others because of the pain you caused. Whatever it might be, you simply have to learn it. Now they say, there was a very interesting story of a woman who killed herself. It was a suicide, but she didn't die. But she went for a time into an astral world where there were many other suicides. And this is how she described it. This was her her experience. She said all of them were looking down. They were just sad like this. And she suddenly realized that this was not a place she wanted to be. She was not a religious person, but the word Jesus came to her mind. And so I think she said out loud, Jesus, with having no relationship to that. As soon as she said Jesus, it caused her to look up. And she said, right above this place of despair, there were all these beings of light who were trying to get the attention of the people who were looking down. And as soon as she looked up, she was drawn up into that. And then eventually she was sent back, to this side. So it's just a matter of time before the suicide person will realize that this didn't help. And if you no longer want to commit suicide, it's because you've tried it and you found out it didn't work. And the trouble with suicide, unfortunately, is it can become a habit. And so sometimes it's a repeating cycle. This is what I've been told. A friend of mine who was I say this because this is sometimes a comfort for people whose mind tends to go towards suicide, to hear that, oh, well, this is something I have done in the past. A woman friend of mine with whom I was talking to about this, we were on the second floor and there was a balcony. And she was telling me, she said all her life she's always thought about killing herself. She never did, thank God, never has. But she said, even as we talk, and we were talking about something difficult, she said, I have an almost irresistible desire to rush out and throw myself off the balcony. So it's like, it's just, but all it is an error. And they will figure it out. And so therefore, they will have to find the courage to face what they ran away from before. So you can phrase that in any way you want, but it's going to be fair. And it's going to be charitable, and it's going to be compassionate. It's going to be guided by a divine mother who loves us. It's not going to be a God who hates us and wants to, grind us into the dirt. That's the great error of the ways people phrase it. This person will have to learn. So if someone you love has committed suicide, what you want to do is you just want to send them light. Just, come on, you can do it. I know you can do it. Stand strong. The angels will help you. Let them help you. And have faith that they'll recover. Okay? Good. Yes? Oh, dear. 2 hours into it, free will. Oh, gosh. I was going to end it with her question. Okay. No, I'm only teasing you because we always get to free will. Well, I know it. This is how I put it, and this is also, again, because I can't explain it, and it gets so complicated. It is self-evident that what we do in the morning affects how we feel in the afternoon. And it's self-evident that if you just crawl into your bed and eat chocolate bonbons, for the next month, your experience of life is not going to be as good as if you come to this ashram. So whether I am compelled to come to the ashram or compelled to get in bed and do nothing but eat chocolates, quite frankly, who cares? It's obvious that what I do affects my destiny. So where is the line? Just try to become completely passive in your life and just wait to see what happens. And then how did that work out for you? So sometimes we ask questions that are bigger than our capacity to understand them, and we convince ourselves that I'll get to work as soon as this question is answered. But Vivekananda's very clever response was, the level of consciousness that asks the question is not capable of comprehending the answer. And I think that's a wonderful, tricky place for us to end, okay? All right. Thank you all. God bless you.